Conversations with Azu Ishekwele.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Conversations with Azu. I am Azuka and I've got the man of the moment, every moment with me right here. Good afternoon.
I was trying to figure out who that was.
You.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Good afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Happy New Year. It's my first time featuring on this year. And it's actually an honor. And particularly because I love the topic of conversation. ECOWAS, is this the beginning of the end? And that's been a serious conversation off the top of my head, right after I heard about the, would I say hostile takeover?
Yeah, well,
good word?
That's fine. A military coup is a hostile takeover. Of course, that's what it is.
Of a couple of the West African states.
Yes.
So, what's up with this article?
Well, thank you for having me. And it's also a pleasure for me to be here and be featuring for the first time since we started with Julius, with yourself and Julius.
That's true.
Program. But let me just go straight to the question about the topic. Well, as you said, in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a couple of very unpleasant incidents West African coast on them. West and Central Africa have now been branded the coup belt of Africa, and of course, the point at issue, which I wrote about today, specifically about the decision of 3 of the 15 members of ECOWAS, specifically Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, to give a quick notice, to issue a quick notice to the community. This has been going on for quite some time. So it's important for us to reflect and then find out what does this really mean? And that's really the subject. What does the quick notice mean, especially in the context in which it has been issued?
Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are landlocked countries.
Yes.
Do you think they can survive economically without ECOWAS?
Well, there are 31 or 32 landlocked countries in the world. And out of that figure, 16 of them are among the poorest countries in the world. Now, that tells you something about, what geography can potentially do. It doesn't mean that countries like Switzerland is also a landlocked country, but it's probably one of the most prosperous countries. But again, it gives you an indication of what sort of situation they found themselves in, especially in light of the what ECOWAS or African Union calls the unconstitutional change in government that has occurred in these countries. It will significantly increase costs of transaction, cost of exchange. You also remember that before the announcement of intention to quit, ECOWAS had suspended trade, had also imposed other sanctions apart from also frozen government assets with these countries. At a point, there was in fact a flight ban.
Yeah.
So all of that will be challenges that these countries, which are among the poorest in Africa and in the world, will now have to deal with on top of the normal challenges that geography can sometimes pose to many countries.
Okay, so when a lot of people heard about the exit from ECOWAS, a lot of Nigerians unfortunately said, well, they don't think ECOWAS would lose anything. Because the truth is, a lot of people believe that belonging to ECOWAS, apart from the name, doesn't really do much for a lot of the African states.
I do not exactly share that view that ECOWAS, yes, that ECOWAS will not lose anything. I think that a lot of informal trade goes on, around the community, and 30% of trade, of informal trade, goes on within the community. And also keep in mind that this is a time when the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is supposed to also remove borders, make trade among African countries easier and more accessible and all of that. So I do not think that the leadership of ECOWAS, it will be good for the community at this time if the community can help it, for any of its members to go their way, because and also keep in mind that ECOWAS was actually a model community to many communities, including SADC. Many communities in Africa actually have used ECOWAS as a model. both in terms of economic and military and political cooperation. So I think that they also know, I'm sure that those who have issued the threat know that there's a lot to lose. Nigeria supplies Niger electricity. It's one of the countries and that had also been cut off since so many other things. I'm talking now about the formal level. So yes, I mean, it's not something that ECOWAS will wish. I don't think ECOWAS will wish that. And I also do not think that it is what citizens of these countries would genuinely wish should happen.
Now, the military leaders of these countries have actually instigated popular support in their own favor by expelling France. And France has been complicit in all of the trouble in the Sahelian region. Now, do you think this is a period for another proxy war between France and Russia? Because as they expel France, Russia is moving in. So are we on the verge of another proxy war?
Well, we will have to wait to see. I suspect that tensions will, of course, rise. I also, what the leaders of these countries have sold to their citizens, they have clearly have exploited the sentiment, the anti-France sentiment, and there is no benevolent colonialist or former colonialist. They all have vested interests, and genuinely so. But France has actually been a bad guy. There isn't much. I think decent citizens of France are ashamed about what's going on and what France has done. But there is nothing that France has done, whether in Niger or Mali or Burkina Faso or anywhere, that the political elite in these countries have not been complicit. You understand? So 50% of the reserves of these countries, 14 countries, 14 francophone, countries, 50% or so of their reserves is held in Paris.
Yeah.
So, and if you go and look closely at what France has done, and not only France, many colonial, there's hardly anything that these folks have done that the political elite in all of these countries have not been complicit. So it's easy for them to, that's an easy sentiment to sell. But I'm sure that sooner than later, citizens will begin to ask themselves, what happens often, and it's happened in Nigeria a few times, when the military, took over, and people will go out in the streets and rejoice. But when the tire meets the road, then
it's different.
It's a different ballgame. And I do not think it will be different in any of these three countries.
Okay, so I'll just conclude by asking this question. A lot of people have blamed the Nigerian president.
Yeah.
That he didn't do enough. He issued a lot of threats. He could have played more of a big brother role, like people have always known Nigeria to be. And they say he contributed. He pushed, and they say you can't push military, you can't push soldiers, you can't push people to do what they don't want to do. And these states are also sovereign states. Now, do you feel like the Nigerian government could have done a lot more to avert this exit?
Well, I think it's a bit more complex and complicated than that. I mean, quite obviously, also keep in mind that before the rapid succession of military coups, unfortunately, the Nigerian government, President Tinubu, had gone, he had become the leader of the chairman of ECOWAS, and had made a number of statements, both in Nigeria and I think also in Kenya, that under his watch as leader of ECOWAS, chairman of ECOWAS, that the community was going to come down heavily against military coups. Now, the coup, I don't think the coup in Niger had occurred at that time. And I think maybe, I'm not also sure whether that of Mali. But then, of course, he now had to live up to that threat. Otherwise, I suspect that he felt that otherwise it would have been seen as an empty threat. Having said, even before those coups occurred, that the community would be a totally different place on his watch, and then the coups occurred. A bit like what Barack Obama faced when he did so-called line in the sand with Iran and all of that. So he had to now confront that moment. And I think that was also why there was that push at that time for that sort of military intervention. But I think that on the whole, if you also, there was so much back and forth. Religious leaders got involved, traditional rulers, I think that urge and that pressure could have been far better calibrated for perhaps a different result. But the thing about power and military takeover of power is that once it happens, there have been a few exceptions in the past that where Nigeria has, but once it happens, unfortunately also the challenges in most of the ECOWAS countries, the serious internal challenges, both financial and military and insurgency problems that they are facing, these challenges have further weakened the community and made it even more difficult for them to follow through on some of the threats that they make. So it's a very complex issue.
This is a good place to stop this conversation. Conversation with Azu is a weekly diary on life and politics. For more of this, you can go to azuishekwene.com and subscribe, like, and share our content. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for coming on the show, Azu.
Thanks for having me, Julius.
Thank you.
And thanks to the co-host, Azuka, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For now.
Bye.
Conversations with Azu Ishekwene.